Happy Monday and welcome to the A's to Z's Building Real Estate team. Oh, here comes Jason Francia right now. All right, guys, as you know, this is the first and third Mondays of every month, and this is where we talk about all things that have to do with building and scaling up to have a real estate team, whether that's an individual buyer's agent or an admin or a team of 16 or a team of 35. Doesn't matter where you fall in the grand scheme of things. This call is for all things team related. So we're just going to jump in. Hi, Jason. Good to see you. Not see you, but not see you. Kind of in the background
Good.
there.
Yay, sorry, I'm
That's
driving.
Don't worry. Pay attention to the road. Rick, Debbie's going to be with us a little bit, and then she's heading off to Pilates. So she's taking care of her, which is good.
Nice.
Um,
Well, yeah, thank you for getting it started, Selena. I was thinking about that today because I talked to a guy that many years ago, I gave him the advice to hire a buyer's agent before he hired an admin. And he says, well, I read the MREA book and you first hires an admin. And I said, no, those are not rules. Those are guidelines.
Yep.
And he was using a transaction coordinator, a contract transaction coordinator, and he was pretty high C, this guy. So he had, his organization was down pretty good, but he just didn't have enough time in his day left to show buyers. So I talked to him, this has got to be 12 years ago. And I said, your first hire for what you're telling me should be a buyer's agent before an admin. So he just was calling to thank me for that. And I said, dude, you don't need to thank me. You did the work. I just gave you an idea. But it really made me realize that we had this call coming up today, and too many people think that the way you run and operate a sales team is in this rigid set of guidelines. The only rigid set of guidelines is profitability, really. I mean, you want to have fluidity, you want to have team culture, you want to have all these things, but at the end of the day, if it's not profitable, you're running a nonprofit. I mean, so for him, it worked out really well, but definitely gave me something that I wanted to chat about, or at least bring up to date here, that we understand that, you know, admin's not always the first thing you do. Sometimes it's just a contract transaction coordinator. Sometimes it's a full-fledged buyer's agent. Sometimes it's just a showing assistant who can turn into a buyer's agent. So all kinds of things there that we've had recent. The other thing too, Selena, that I wanted to say that maybe I should have sent out something this morning. I forgot about Reach. Send out to Reach to have everybody.
I know I put some things in my reminder about Sunday nights and whatnot. So we'll get kind of moving on that a little bit more, since we don't have as many people show up for this particular call.
Hey, can I ask you guys a question? And I'm gonna have to go probably here in like 5 minutes, and then I'll jump back on in about 30 minutes if you guys are still on. I took on buyer's agents, and unfortunately, oh shoot, you guys record this. You guys record this.
Do I need to pause it for a moment so you can ask a question?
That would be awesome.
Rick, is that okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, one moment. In particular. Doesn't that just make you mad? Doesn't it just make you mad that you have someone who has successfully closed leads from a very trusted lead source for himself? Yeah. And he's giving them, literally handing them, like, hello, take my
hello.
And they're like, so sorry, I'm a little burnt out from my vacation right now. $22,000 doesn't sound good to me. I'm like, I need my California license yesterday. I'm gonna go work with Jason. So it's really frustrating, but this is a clear example of not having the right people on the bus. Right.
Well, he refers stuff in the meantime, like outside of his team, outside of his group.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's really where you can look, is like, now, like, can you refer it out to someone else and at least make something off of it versus losing the potential buyer, you know, or seller at this point. So we'll talk to him about that. You know, this is the hard part, right? You want to stop being the sole person who is creating the business, right? You don't want to have to be that one and only lead source for your business. And you try to offer that opportunity. So it comes down to people, right? It just comes down to people, right, Mr. Jiha?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is the most casual
think-
I've ever seen Rick dress.
Yeah, I was just freezing. I got up at 5 to take my wife to the airport and it just never, I just couldn't warm up. So I went to take this off and I thought, I'm not taking it off. It's too cold. So,
It's chilly. It is chilly.
yeah. What is it in Fresno today?
Oh, last week on Friday, it was like 95. It's freaking
And
ridiculous.
today?
Today, I haven't gone outside. I will be in a few minutes, but
No,
high of
it's
70 today.
oh no, it's nowhere near that. It's like, it's literally like high, maybe I don't think it's gonna reach 60. I think it's 50 something. So, and
Yeah,
the
it's
winds.
cold and
Pretty
rainy.
right now.
It's
Yeah.
cold and rainy in Carmel. I'm not going outside.
It's cooling off this week for sure. It's gonna be in the 60s, so.
Yeah. Debbie.
Okay.
So how are things going with your things that you are putting into place?
Is that for me?
Yeah,
So last week I connected with Sherry Mason and we decided to hold each other accountable
Nice.
and
nice.
on making phone calls. And so there were a couple of days that I was very productive. And then there was a day that I just kind of tanked. And so that was Friday. So then Saturday, I thought, you know what? I'm working on Saturday since I seemed to take Friday off unintentionally, but it happened. And on Saturday, even though I didn't make phone calls, I was going through a group of old leads that I had gotten from open houses or other sources, FSBOs, expireds that I had acquired back in 2017 when I first moved to Fresno. And so I wanted to make sure they were all in my CRM, and a few of them weren't, but I set up 24 people on the lead revival campaign through
Nice.
KB4. I set up 5 people in my HomeBot app that weren't in there, that I had their address and email for them. The ones that I didn't have an address or email for, I sent them a letter. Oh, no, I had their address. I didn't have an email for them. I sent them a really cute little letter that basically says what a year. And if you want to know your home value, here's a QR code for HomeBot.
Nice.
So I sent that to 13 people. And then I put 5 people on a monthly market report. So I'm at least doing, I know
Yeah.
it's not a phone call, but it's something generating something else. And I wrote 2 handwritten notes then. And today I've already done probably, I addressed all the envelopes, but I've done 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I've done about a little over a dozen, maybe a dozen and a half. I've written out the personal notes and I've pulled up each property to see how long ago it was that they moved in. And I said something to the effect of, can you believe it's already been 3.5 years?
Yeah. Love it.
And like someone that moved into a mobile, I was like, hey, it's already been 3 years. Have you thought about a condo or a house? And so kind of doing that. And then the people that have like moved out of state, I'm like, I'm, just trying to stay in touch. And I'm like, I'm preparing for a scorching summer. Like this one couple moved to Kentucky and like summers are like 80 degrees. I'm like, aren't you glad you moved away?
Yes. Lucky.
14 feet. I bet you don't miss that. And
I
then
love
live by a lake and everything in Kentucky. So trying to be personable and all of that. And so I've got probably about, I don't know, 7 or 8 more to go. One gal, she had a real tough time when she moved in her house. All kinds of stuff went wrong. The seller didn't disclose hardly anything and had to have basically her whole front yard torn up for the plumbing and then electrical work and all kinds of stuff. And so I said, I know that first year was tough, but I hope you've settled in. It's been a couple years. I hope you're enjoying your beautiful little home. And she has an adorable little property. The house is super cute. So like just trying to give that personal touch and kind of like, hey, I'm still here.
You did more in a week than most people do in 3 months. So that's amazing.
I'm gonna congratulate you. That's a lot.
That is a lot.
Doesn't seem like it. Although I am the type of person that I don't give myself much credit because I should have been doing this all along. So I'm like, I hope it's not too late.
No, it's never too late. And remember, here's what happens when you start. I said this before, Debbie, but when you start doing things like this, the universe and God conspire to start bringing you business. And it's not most likely going to come immediately from what you're doing. It's going to come from somewhere else you didn't expect it. So.
Yeah.
Yep, and then I always buy really cute little postage stamps. Like my son's a cowboy, so I got these really cute cowboy ones for the people that live in Clovis. And it's the rodeo just happened this last weekend, and so that's kind of hot right now. So for the people in Clovis, I'm putting the cowboy stickers on.
Love it.
Who have pets, I know these are like cat and dog ones, and so doing that. So
Makes it.
I always do something fun as far as the postage stamps, and I never do anything plain. Like it's always a red envelope because red and black are my colors.
Well, it draws the attention too. And you know what I love is that people just don't love getting mail anymore that just looks generic or whatever. And no one gets excited about stuff at the mail anymore, except for whenever they get something like that. And then
That's
they're
what I
like,
did.
fun.
Yeah. And I think I've gotten some feedback before in the past, and one lady even told me, she goes, I look forward to your colorful envelopes every month, because I would do a different color based on the season. Like yellow would be in July, I'd do green in like the spring, and
Aw.
red at Christmas and stuff like that. So I'd send her a quarterly housing report, and she loved getting them. And then she ended up listing with somebody else. I'm like, what? I don't understand the logic.
I tell you, you can't help but people. I mean, some people are just pretty.
Yeah.
They're just pretty. So talk to me about what I know we've talked in the past. Debbie's like my person.
Yeah.
No, you're like my person. What are your long-term goals? And we can talk about it here because now it's going to be documented on video. Like what you want for yourself. Do you want to build a team? Is that what you want?
I don't necessarily know that I want a team per se, but I do want to build my rev share, because that I'm not getting any younger. I'm in my 50s, and retirement is like punching me in my back.
You don't look like you're in your 50s.
I'll be 53 this year, Mr. Jiha.
Wow.
I act like I'm about 23, but I'll be 53.
That's probably what's keeping you young. So
But I want to be able to relax and retire. And my son's 24. He'll be 25 in July. He's got a great girlfriend, and I'm hoping that one day I get grandkids. I'm not pressuring him, but I'm hoping one day I get grandkids, and he's already told me that I'm raising them. I'm like, what about your wife? Give her a shot.
that's crazy.
He's like, nope. He's like, I want you to raise my kids.
Aw.
He said, she's got to work. Okay. If that works for the two of you, then whatever. But I mean, I want to be able to go see him. He moved to Texas. So I want to be able to have that financial freedom. My big why has always been financial freedom. Like, I'm my sole provider. I'm single. I live alone. And it's scary when the bank account gets down to very little. And you're like, I have to sell a home in the next 2 weeks. It has to go into contract in the
Yeah.
next 2 weeks, or I'm homeless, literally. And I've had that in the last 6 months, a couple of times. And it's not a comfortable place to be. And even my TC work is very slow.
Really? Right now?
Yeah. I have one agent that has listings. That's it.
Well, so let me ask you something. How far-fetched is it to take, you're a hard worker, to take Jason up on his, or fucking move up here? We could use you. I'm serious. We're most likely going to get a Zillow Flex account. So, you know, the commission percentage after the referral fee is less, but the average sale price is so much higher.
Just saying.
Well, my son wants me to move to Texas, and I've thought about it because I've never been this far away from him. He's my only kid. Moving costs a lot of money. And I mean, I just moved within Fresno, and it was $1,200. I can't do it myself.
Yeah.
I needed help. So I had to hire guys. But
Just something to think about.
Yeah.
I've relocated from Southern California. Geez, Mom, I've relocated. She just keeps going. I relocated from Southern California to Fresno, and it was hard getting into a new market. It was really hard, although I didn't have any resources. I moved here and was like, okay, here I am. And then I realized this is a very loyal community to the locals, and I'm an outsider, I don't know the area. And so it was hard.
Yeah.
Starting in a new market is difficult.
It is tough.
Although it's not impossible. It's not impossible, because I did it. And last year was my best year I've ever had. And I put a little bit more effort into it last year than ever before. I was involved in more coaching calls, more networking type opportunities that afforded me over 65% of my business was referrals.
Wow.
So I'm getting a slow start to this year. It's been tough.
So I know you're doing the take control thing.
Mhm.
Here's my thought process. And and I'm just going to throw this out there. I want you to, because my husband and I did this recently, Rick and I are deeply involved in PSI. I don't know, you probably heard us talk about it in the past. It sort of opened my husband and I up to this thought process that we'd never had before, right? So it was what led to our decision to move to California, right? Because we had just moved. We had just moved from New York to a tiny little island in South Carolina, and I said I was going to die there. Like somebody was going to have to like carry me out in a pine box. Yeah, I said I was staying there. So it's a different way of thinking about when you're trying to make big decisions or you're trying to open yourself up to possibilities, right? Sit down one day, and you can do it with a family member, you can do it alone. My husband and I did it together. It took us 2 weeks. We opened our minds up to the possibility of doing something over 2 weeks. And we said, we took big giant pages of the sticky whiteboard paper, right? And we threw it out there and we said, if we were to make a change, or we were to open our mind up to any possibility about moving or changing something, and just being completely open to it, right? Like not thinking about the consequences or how hard it would be or what was crazy about it or anything like that. For 2 straight weeks, nothing was off the table. And we were thinking, because I've got kids all over the freaking planet, right? So I had one in Manhattan, one in Japan, one in Hawaii. I've still got one at home. I've got a grandbaby on the way. I've got like 52 different things happening, right? And we had just bought that house, and like there was just all this stuff going on. But for 2 straight weeks, all the thoughts went on the paper. Like anytime and bear in mind, my husband's not working right now. He left a whole life of corporate to do a startup. 0 income in over a year. He went from making this much money to the no money. To the no money. But we were like, nothing's off the table. And I mean, there were crazy ass ideas on there, Debbie. And I mean, it was just like all over the board. And we were just like throwing it out there. Now, obviously, at the same time, I was having this partnership with Rick and Casey, and I was traveling back and forth to California. But at the time, we were like, we're not moving to California. My husband lived in California. He was like, I have never, ever, I can't even tell you the number of evers written on the piece of paper that he said, ever moving back to California. But for 2 straight weeks, total open, no matter how crazy, complicated, expensive, whatever it was, sounded. And then we would sit down and we would look at it again. And then slowly over time, we started marking it through. We're like, no, we don't ever want to live there. Like at one point he mentioned someplace and I was like, we are not moving there. Like it would go off the list. Right. And it was just like this totally open idea of just like, if I could, would I? If money was no object, if it wouldn't be too complicated, if I could be there, what would I do? Like all of these different things. Start that. Like just grab a giant thing of paper and be like, no holds barred. Everything is possible in the whole wide world. Money's no object, whatever. And start that list and then start fine tuning it down, whether it's Texas, whether it's California, whether it's someplace else that you've ever imagined, doesn't matter. Whatever it is, start there. You have to think about what you want long-term because you're already thinking about retirement. Right. So if you're thinking I'm 53 and I've got to think about these things, my husband, by the way, is older than you. So imagine all of our retirement money is now gone because we're using it all while he has no money. So think about all of those.
I've already gone through all mine.
Yeah. It's all gone. Ours is gone. It's gone now. So think about all those things and like, okay, if that was the case, where would I go? What would I do? And what does that look like? And by when do I want to be there? And then start building it like that. Because when that happens, you'd be surprised how things start lining up. Because that was nuts. It was like, we were like, I don't know, this seems a little crazy. And then all of a sudden, like stuff just sort of started happening because our brain was sort of thinking about it. And all of a sudden magic just sort of started. I know it sounds crazy, but it was because we'd actually opened our mind up to the possibilities of it. And it was like, I don't know, this seems like this could really work out. And all of a sudden it just was. And it was like, huh. You know, my husband who said never, ever, 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 ever to California was like, I don't know, California sounds okay. And then we found like the most incredible rental. Like it's this beautiful house and it worked out really beautifully, right? And then I was like, oh my God, we just bought this boat. Now we're gonna have to sell the boat. And then we got an offer like the following week. And it was just like, all of a sudden, stuff just sort of started happening. Now, bear in mind, he's still unemployed. So, still over here panicking just a little bit. But at the same time, like, because you start mapping it out that way and you are in that class, which I've started taking, you've got to start envisioning it. And right now it's so nebulous out there about what you want and where you want to be and where you want to land. There's no clear path. No clear path right now. We call it a strategic plan, which sounds really like clunky and businessy. And I don't want you to think about it from that perspective. Like, I want you to just be like, if there was nothing holding me back whatsoever, no money, no time constraints, I don't have people to help me move because that feels like it's overwhelming. But if all of that was off the table and you could do whatever you want, that's where I want you to start. It's a totally different way of thinking about it. And then you'd be surprised by how after that, it's like, oh, all of a sudden, all these possibilities are actually right in front of me. And they just start to happen. Rick, you can speak to that a little bit too. I know you can. You're muted though.
You're hitting the nail right on the head. It's crazy. This is so much about you having intention on where you're going. And your intention is, I got to get business. But if you have to have a bigger intention to draw in more energy and to bring more things to you, right? And by a bigger vision, you might be saying, okay, what's it going to take me to retire? All right. Look, you're the hardest working person I know, Debbie. Right? Yeah.
I mean, I haven't been lately, but yes, I have been known
Well,
to.
but you have the desire. You have such a strong desire. You know, you just start talking about recruiting, right? So are you jumping on the builder calls?
I'm just in the last month, I've been starting to get back into the swing of things and getting on calls and doing stuff. I've been very lax. Like I said, I had a very slow start to this year.
Well, I would say that jumping onto those calls is also going to be helpful for you because you know a lot of people. And even if you don't know them well, there's no reason not to cold call them, but there's ways to cold call them so it feels warm,
Right.
Anybody you ever did a deal with, anybody, who's your upline? Is it Kim?
Kim and then Krista. And so I'm also with Jesse and they have fabulous. I mean, I used to be on every single call and it got to the point where I was like, okay, 3 hours a day I'm on calls. I could learn. I love the learning part of it, but there's got to be time in my day to implement.
Right.
And I was getting too caught up in being on every call that I wasn't necessarily implementing everything being taught. So that kind of hung me up a little bit, although it did bring me a lot of referrals.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, it did kind of pay off in a sense, but I never did implement a lot of it.
Yeah.
Got it.
I'm starting over again with the implementation part of it.
Good.
Yeah. So I think it's hard when we don't have a clear idea of what the vision looks like. Absolutely, I want more business is one thing.
Right.
When we start really putting it out there, it's kind of like when, and I tell the story about when somebody tells me that they have a goal. Like I was just interviewing somebody the other day for a client, right? I interview people whenever they're hiring new agents and new people on the staff all the time. And I was telling someone about this story because they were like, oh yeah, I want to close a couple of transactions a year or whatever. And I said, oh, I'm going to give you an assignment. And they hadn't even joined yet, right? But I always do this to people who kind of don't know what their goal is yet. And I said, I interviewed a buyer's agent. She works for a large team that I coach down near Atlanta. And the buyer's agent came on, she'd done her business plan, right? And it was last November. And she said, one of her goals was to take her family to France. And I was like, that's great. And I said, well, what's it going to take to get your family to France? And she's like, well, I don't know. It's just one of these big goals. I've always had it. I don't know. It's probably going to take me a couple years to get to that point. And I said, wow, a couple years. And I said, well, tell me, I mean, I love the goal. It's fantastic. Let's talk about it a little bit more. And she said, well, what? I just want to go to Paris and like right around there. And I said, okay, for how long? And she's like, a week. I just want to take them for a week. And I'm like, okay, well, how much money do we need for this trip? She's like, it's a lot. It's a lot of money. And I was like, okay, well, we're going for a week. Are we flying coach? Or are we flying first class?
Have to fly first class.
Yeah. And I was like, because that's a long trip, right?
Yeah, I've done it.
And she was like, I was like, okay, so I start taking notes. I'm like, all right, we're going for a week. Realistically, you want to go for 9 days because it's like a day of travel on the front and the back end. So I'm like writing it down. And I'm like, we're flying first class. How many people in your family? There's 5. So I'm like 5 people, first class. We're going for like 9 days technically. I'm like, where are we staying? I don't know. I said, well, are we Airbnb? Are we staying at a nice hotel? Like, what are we thinking? Thinking 4-star, and she's like, I don't know. I was like, okay, so we got to figure out the hotel. And I was like, what are we seeing? Are we doing the sightseeing tour? Are we doing the big thing? Like, are we going into the countryside for a couple of days? And she's like, I don't know. And I said, here's what I want you to do. I said, it's really, really hard to put that on your list. And you actually don't even know what it entails. So now you have no idea how much money you need for this trip. And now you've got this idea in your mind that you're 3 to 4 years away from actually reaching this goal because you're like, I don't know, it's going to be so expensive.
It makes it that much more out of reach when you don't know what you need in order to obtain it.
Yeah. So I said, here's the assignment. You've got 1 week. You've got 1 week. Go home to your husband. I want you guys to decide where you're staying, what you're seeing, all of this different stuff. I want you to Google and look up how much the flight is to fly first class during whatever time of the year it is. Come back to me with the budget of like the trip. And then I want you to also tell me what your average price point is and what your commission split is after you pay your team leader and they were with KW, whatever your splits are, come back and tell me what that is. So she comes back, she gives me all the numbers and I'm looking at it and I was like, okay. And she goes, what? And I was like, so you think you're about what, 3 years out? She's like, yeah, it's about 3 years. And I was like, based on what you just gave me, you just need to sell 4 extra houses this year. And she was like, what? I was like, well, the trip costs this. This is your average commission after all of your splits. This is how much you said you wanted to close this year. If you wanted to actually go on that trip, all you need to do is sell 4 extra houses this year. And she was like, oh my God, I could sell 4 extra houses. And I was like, could you do that like the next 6 months? How's Paris sound in December? Let's go. Like
really cold. That's when I went.
So that's what I'm saying. It's like when we just say, I want to do more business, your brain can't even see where you're going and it can't allow anything in.
Yeah. One thing with Krista's coaching program, she did teach us, in one of her modules, how to micro step your goals. So you take your bigger goal, then you break it down by monthly, weekly, daily, and how to do the baby steps.
I love it.
I need to get going because I've got to go work on
Pilates
body here. Not a Pilates body.
Pilates body.
Making it into one. And I will definitely, I'm going to commit to this. By next week, I will have what I want to earn as far as like my income, and then for a big reward similar to that, because I do believe in rewarding myself and I do feel like I need it to keep motivated. What my rewards will be, and I need them like quarterly.
Good. I also want you to start thinking about what you want on the agent attraction side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll have fun at Pilates.
Oh, look at both of us.
Yeah, and just let's Yeah, I like what you said. We'll just
Narrow
narrow
it
it
down.
down, but you focused on the smaller goals, building to the bigger goals. So.
Okay, thank you too. I appreciate the one-on-one. This was like so worth it. The two-on-one.
Bye, Debbie.
All right,
Yeah.
see you guys.
Rick, did you want to wait for a second to see if Jason pops back on, or you want to not worry about it?
Let's, can we jump